In the world of organized crime, anything can happen. One minute someone can be your closest alliance, deals are made and money is coming in. But all it takes is one wrong move for everything to come crashing down. Once trust has been broken, a situation can turn from friendly to a full-blown war. Of course, this is a tale as old as time itself. In the Mafia, friends turn into enemies overnight. If anyone knows about this, it's John Gotti. He was once the most notorious boss of the Gambino crime family. While he made a lot of friends in his day, he also made a lot of enemies on his way to the top. When he was linked with the Westies, an Irish crime gang, they seemed like an unstoppable force. The gang's ruthless methods were exactly what Gotti wanted to get his competition out of the way. But like most alliances in the Mafia, things turned ugly when greed and power got in the way. In today's video, we're going to delve into what really happened between John Gotti and the Westies. But before we get into that story, let's take a look at the background of both parties to give you the full scoop on what really happened. John Gotti was born in the Bronx, New York in 1940. He was one of 13 children born to a family that relied on their father's unpredictable income. His story is truly one of rags to riches, even though he didn't earn his money honestly. One thing about John Gotti is that he was always motivated to make money. While most 12-year-olds were riding their bikes and hanging out with friends, John was looking for opportunities. He ended up becoming an errand boy for an underground club, where he met Aniello Dellacroce. Aniello saw something in the young boy and started mentoring him. The mentorship from Aniello ultimately led to bigger things for John Gotti. Once he was old enough, his mentor was able to open doors for him into the Gambino crime family. Now, there was some conflict in this family. The Gambino family was run by Paul Castellano, who viewed the criminal organization as a business. He wanted to keep operations low-key and had very specific rules. One of them was that his Mafia members were not allowed to be involved in the drug trade. As Gotti established himself in the crime family, he was mainly taking orders from Aniello, who was Paul's underboss. He quickly became one of the biggest earners in the Gambino family. But there was one problem. John Gotti and his crew were involved in the heroin trade, something the Gambino boss was against. But John had a solution for every problem he encountered. He ended up coming up with the ultimate plan and pulled it through. He arranged for a hit to be placed on Paul Castellano. Once Paul was assassinated, John climbed the ranks and became the Gambino family boss. The Westies were an Irish gang that was based in New York. Most of this gang's operations were based in a neighborhood called Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan. The gang originated in the mid-1960s and had a reputation for its violent and brutal tactics. While this gang was one of the most ruthless at the time, it was on the small side. It was rare for this gang to have more than 20 members at a time. While there were many associates, most of them were serving time in prison. Mickey Spillane was a key player in this gang. He was involved in many gang-related crimes, like bookmaking and loan sharking, but he was most notorious for the gang's snatch rackets, where they would kidnap businessmen for ransom. Sure, he was a dangerous criminal, but he was also well-respected in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood. However, there was one person in this neighborhood who didn't respect Mickey Spillane. That was Jimmy Coonan. Jimmy was determined to seek revenge on Mickey for kidnapping his father. At the age of 18 in 1966, he attempted his first hit on the gang leader by shooting at Mickey and his associates from a rooftop. His hits were unsuccessful, but Mickey knew this kid wasn't someone to mess with. In 1977, Jimmy was still plotting his revenge, but he had other business he needed to take care of first. Charles Ruby Stein was a loan shark at the time. He was well connected to both the Gambino and Genovese families. Jimmy could make a lot of money if he wiped out Ruby. Yes, this was incredibly risky, but the payoff was worth it. Jimmy arranged a team effort with some trusted alliances to get the job done. Roy DeMeo was a hitman for the Gambino crime family at the time. He knew about the assassination that Jimmy pulled off. Typically, in the Mafia world, this knowledge would lead to the murder of the young Westie. But Roy had other plans. He wanted to help the gangster. So Jimmy arranged for Roy DeMeo to take care of his enemy. With Mickey out of the way, it was time for a new generation to take charge. This led to Jimmy Coonan becoming the new leader. It is believed that Roy DeMeo took out Mickey Spillane as a gift to Jimmy Coonan, knowing that with his rival out of the way, it would make room for Jimmy to climb to the top. But what was his motive for doing this? Helping Jimmy secure leadership of the Westies would strengthen the ties between the Irish gang and the Gambino family. There were a few reasons why this alliance was beneficial to the Gambino family. First of all, the Westies were known for their violence. By having them on call, the Gambino family could hire them as hitmen. This was beneficial because the Westies hitmen could get the job done, but it also eliminated the risk for the Gambino family. If a hitman was ever caught by law enforcement, it seriously reduced the risk of the crime being traced back to the Gambino family. But the Gambino family wasn't straight up using the Westies. They offered the small Irish gang protection. This was crucial as other mob families were trying to take control of operations in Hell's Kitchen. It meant that the gang could continue operating, and it also meant that the Gambino family could extend their influence and criminal activities in the neighborhood. When the alliance between Jimmy Coonan and Roy DeMeo was formed, Paul Castellano was the head of the family. Trouble arose for Jimmy and his associates when the body of Roy Stein was found. This could have been a death sentence for Jimmy and his partner in crime. Paul wanted to speak to them about what happened, and Roy advised the young Westie to deny any involvement. This led to the beginning of the allyship between the Gambino family and the Westies. Under the Gambinos' protection, the Westies were to hand over a 10% share of the profits. While Jimmy was satisfied with this arrangement, the rest of his crew wasn't. Now, before the Westies became involved with the Gambino family, Roy was just a hired hitman who did contract hits for the Italian Mafia. But after arranging the deal with the Westies, he became a made man in the Gambino family. In the 1980s, several key events shaped the dynamics between the Gambino family and the Westies. Jimmy and a few other Westies were sent to prison in 1980 for a few years. At this point, other Westies weren't happy with the way Jimmy was running things. They felt like they weren't getting paid their dues for the crimes they were committing. All of the money that should have been theirs was going towards the Gambino family. Jimmy didn't really care what they thought. When he got out of prison, he started spending less time around Hell's Kitchen and grew closer to the Italians. Allegedly, there were even conversations taking place between players of the Westies to take Jimmy out, but they were too afraid to make the move. Things were not going well for Roy DeMeo in the Gambino family either. He was operating a car theft ring that was busted. This bust was so heinous that even Paul Castellano was being investigated. He was furious and started seeking members of the Gambino family to put a hit on the hitman. Paul first turned to key players in the family, John Gotti and Frank DeChico, to take on the job. But Roy DeMeo was one of the scariest contract killers at the time. It was believed that his body count was around 200 people. Neither one of these guys was up for the job. The only people who were brave enough to take on this hit were the very same men who had been killing along with DeMeo, his own crew members. Of course, it's important to remember that there has never been any proof of DeMeo's own crew placing the hit on him. Nobody has ever been convicted of the crime, but Mafia tales and theories point to his people. One of Jimmy's main associates was Mickey Featherstone. Mickey and some young members of the Westies were plotting a plan to get Jimmy out of the way. However, Jimmy was swift and won the younger crew members over again. He even offered a murder contract to Mickey. While Mickey declined, Jimmy had bigger plans. He arranged for another Westies member to disguise himself as Mickey and pull off the hit. Mickey was convicted of the murder and discovered who really set him up. It was all the information he needed to make a deal with the government. He gave them all the information they needed, including tips on how the Westies were connected to the Gambino family. Jimmy was sentenced to 75 years in prison. Now, a few years went by and the Gambino family had a new leader. John Gotti had arranged an assassination that took out Paul Castellano. From there, he stepped up and became the Gambino family boss. With Jimmy behind bars, the partnership between the Gambinos and the Westies had dried up, but John Gotti was going to need some help. It was 1986, and the Westies were run by Bosco Radonjic. John Gotti was on trial at the time for racketeering charges. The Teflon Don would go to any lengths to avoid prison, and this time there was a golden opportunity. Bosco's close friend George Pape was on the jury. Bosco reached out to Gotti's main man Sammy the Bull Gravano and arranged a deal. He arranged to acquit his vote for a $60,000 payday. It worked, and at the time, nobody was wiser. Investigators believed John Gotti got off free because of foul play. They had no idea he bribed a jury member until later on in 1992 when Sammy the Bull became an informant and spilled everything. The fallout between the Westies and Gotti's Gambino family started when Mickey Featherstone began cooperating with the government. This didn't just signify a fallout between the two crime groups. It also began what was known as the end of the Westies. Mickey's wife Sissy also cooperated with the government, agreeing to record conversations with other Westies members. Key members of the Westies were under the impression that Sissy needed financial help since Mickey was locked away. Members like Kevin Kelly, Billy Boken, and Kenny Shannon would stop by to check up on her and make sure she had everything she needed. Little did they know, she was baiting them to talk about their criminal activities. Sissy did better than anyone could have expected. She was able to record Kevin admitting to setting up Mickey for the murder and Billy admitting that he was the actual murderer. So at this point, you might be wondering what any of this has to do with John Gotti. The fallout between the Westies and the Gambino family was already in the midst because there were so many internal struggles. With Jimmy Coonan no longer calling the shots, there was little to no connection. Bosco didn't seem interested in maintaining the previous relationship that Jimmy had with the family. But trouble came when other members of the Westies started talking on Sissy's recording. Kevin had admitted to shooting John O'Connor in the buttocks as a favor to John Gotti. To add fuel to the fire, once Kevin was sent to prison, he openly made friends with other rival Mafia circles, like the Philly crew and Colombo family members. John Gotti was to go to trial for the attempted murder of John O'Connor. The FBI bugged Gotti, and they learned a lot of secrets because the man just wouldn't stop talking. He was even recorded at one point saying, "We're gonna bust him up." He was only recorded between November 30th, 1989 and January 24th, 1990, but he spilled enough secrets to build a case against him. At this point in time, John Gotti had a lawyer named Bruce Cutler who was known for his loud but extremely effective methods. He ended up getting Gotti acquitted of the crimes, cementing the Mafia boss's nickname Teflon Don. Gotti may have been a free man at the time, but he had no interest in rekindling with the Westies. John Gotti may have gotten the last laugh when he was acquitted in the trial, but he would later pay the price for the crimes he committed when he was convicted to life in prison in 1992. The Gambino family is still believed to be operating today, however, they keep their operations out of the public eye. People can only speculate and theorize on what they could be doing. As for the Westies, it's believed that the gang is no longer in effect. Law enforcement's war on organized crime put this gang to an end. We hope you enjoyed our video today on the ups and downs of the Westies and John Gotti's Gambino family. The Westies rose to power with the Italian Mafia family after former leader Jimmy Coonan formed an alliance with hitman Roy DeMeo. However, both men's unpredictable actions put an end to their activities. Roy DeMeo made a huge mistake, leading to his eventual murder. Jimmy Coonan framed one of his allies, leading to his takedown. When Jimmy went down, members of the Gambino family did as well. This put John Gotti in the mix, which signaled the end of the Westies alliance. Thank you for staying with us to the end of our video. We have many other Mafia stories to share with you. If you want to see them, make sure you hit like, share, and subscribe.